The leech collector. In the 18th and 19th centuries, leeches were used in medicine for bloodletting, believed to cure almost every ailment. Someone had to collect those leeches, and that job fell to the leech collector. Collectors waded into swamps and ponds, often barefoot, letting the parasites attach to their legs before pulling them off and dropping them into jars. They'd leave covered in bites, blood loss, and infections. Worse, leeches were becoming scarce due to overharvesting, so collectors had to venture deeper into stagnant, disease-filled waters. Many suffered from anemia or gangrene. The groom of the stool. During England's Tudor period, the groom of the stool was a position of high trust, but also extreme humiliation. His duty? To assist the king during his private moments. The groom managed the royal toilet, brought towels, and sometimes even wiped the king's backside. It was a job that required absolute discretion and loyalty. Surprisingly, it came with influence. The groom was one of the few people who could speak privately with the king. Still, it's hard to imagine that level of intimacy as a career ambition. It was equal parts power and pure embarrassment. The tosher. In 19th century London, the sewers were like a hidden city, and toshers were the scavengers who worked down there. They waded through human waste, mud, and rats looking for lost coins, jewelry, or anything valuable washed down from the streets above. It was dangerous work. The tunnels were filled with toxic gases that could suffocate a man instantly, and sudden floods could drown them before they had time to escape. Toshers carried long poles and lamps, but even then, they were at risk from explosions caused by methane buildup. They made decent money when lucky, but the constant threat of death or disease made it one of the most miserable jobs in history. The resurrectionist, body snatcher. Before legal cadavers were available for medical research, surgeons and anatomy schools relied on a black market. Enter the resurrectionists, grave robbers who dug up freshly buried bodies at night and sold them to medical schools. The work was gruesome, illegal, and risky. They operated under the cover of darkness, digging quietly while families guarded cemeteries to protect their loved ones' remains. If caught, body snatchers could be beaten, imprisoned, or even killed by angry mobs. The stench, the moral horror, and the constant fear of getting caught made this a nightmare profession. Still, it was profitable. A good body could sell for what an average laborer made in months. The rat catcher. Cities across Europe were crawling with rats during the Middle Ages and well into the 19th century. To control the spread of disease, rat catchers were hired to hunt them down, often by hand. They used dogs, traps, and sometimes even their bare hands to capture rodents alive. The worst part was the risk. Rats carried the plague and other deadly infections. One bite could mean death. Rat catchers sometimes displayed their kills in the street or kept rats for sport, selling them for public games where dogs would compete to kill the most. It was dirty, dangerous, and often deadly, but essential work for the health of growing cities. The tanner. Before modern factories, tanners worked in open-air workshops turning raw animal hides into leather. The process involved soaking skins in urine, dog feces, and animal brains to soften them before drying. The smell was so unbearable that tanneries were usually built far outside towns. Workers spent hours knee-deep in vats of filth, constantly exposed to bacteria and toxic chemicals. Their clothes and skin absorbed the stench permanently. You could smell a tanner from a mile away. It was steady work, but it destroyed your health, lungs, and social life. In many towns, tanners were considered untouchables. The gong farmer. In Tudor England, toilets were mostly pits or cesspools beneath buildings. Someone had to clean them out. That was the gong farmer's job. Armed with a bucket and shovel, they descended into the foulest parts of the city to scoop out human waste by hand. The work had to be done at night, usually between midnight and 5 a.m., to avoid offending the public with the smell. It paid well because no one else wanted to do it, but the health risks were horrific. Suffocation from methane gas, drowning in waste, or catching deadly diseases were all common. It was one of the most revolting jobs in human history, and yet vital for sanitation. The whipping boy. In royal households of the 16th and 17th centuries, princes were considered too sacred to be punished. So instead, when a young prince misbehaved, his companion, the whipping boy, was beaten in his place. The idea was that seeing his innocent friend punished would teach the prince empathy and discipline. But in reality, it was psychological torture for both. Whipping boys were chosen from noble but lower-ranking families, living closely with the royal child. They shared in lessons, meals, and games, only to be whipped for the prince's mistakes. It was an absurd system that perfectly illustrated how unfair and strange royal traditions could be. The plague doctor. During the Black Death, plague doctors became a grim symbol of hope and horror. Dressed in long coats, gloves, and beaked masks stuffed with herbs, they were sent to treat the infected, though treat is a generous word. Their job mostly involved recording deaths, lancing buboes, and performing primitive procedures that rarely helped. The risk was enormous. Even with their protective outfits, many plague doctors caught the disease and died within weeks. The sight of one walking through a medieval town was enough to terrify everyone, not just because of the costume, but because it meant death was near. The coal miner industrial revolution. In the 18th and 19th centuries, coal powered everything, but the cost was human. Miners worked deep underground in total darkness, breathing coal dust and risking cave-ins, explosions, and gas poisoning. Children as young as 6 were often used to crawl through narrow tunnels too small for adults. They hauled carts of coal for hours, covered in soot, their lungs slowly blackening from dust inhalation. There was no ventilation, no safety gear, and little rest. While mining fueled the modern world, it also destroyed generations of workers who spent their lives in darkness, literally and figuratively. The executioner. It may sound like a position of power, but being an executioner was one of the most cursed jobs in history. Executioners were necessary, but society shunned them. They lived on the edge of towns, forbidden to socialize or marry freely. Many passed the job down through families because no one else would take it. The work itself was brutal. A single mistake with an axe or rope could lead to humiliation or riots. Public executions were gruesome and emotionally scaring. Despite their essential role in enforcing law, executioners were treated as outcasts, haunted by the weight of what they did for a living. The matchstick girl. In Victorian England, thousands of young girls worked in match factories, dipping sticks into phosphorus to make matches. The pay was terrible, the hours long, and the fumes deadly. Prolonged exposure to white phosphorus caused phossy jaw, a horrifying disease that rotted the bones of the face and jaw from the inside. Girls worked 12 to 16 hours a day, their skin pale, their teeth crumbling, many dying young. It was one of the first jobs to spark labor reform movements, as journalists and activists exposed the cruelty behind the industry. These young women literally risked their faces and lives for a product that sold for pennies. The knockerup. Before alarm clocks became common, people had to be woken up manually, and that was the job of the knockerup. Armed with a long stick or pea shooter, they'd walk the streets before dawn, tapping on bedroom windows to wake factory workers. The pay was small, and the hours were terrible. They worked through freezing mornings and rain, often walking miles just to ensure others made it to work on time. Ironically, once alarm clocks became affordable, they were among the first to lose their jobs, replaced by the very technology that ended their sleepless routine.